So
Yeah.
people like that are very invaluable.
A lot of the stuff is checking your ego. I mean, just because at the end of the day, your title only signs you up for the losses, your team has to get the wins. So it's making sure that you are staying in communication. And even though you have an idea, it's not coming across as this is the direction. It's, does this make sense?
Yeah.
Because the first time you think you're the smartest person in the room is a problem.
Mm.
So, I mean, there's a reason that, when you look at growing up and being in team sports, like, especially with softball, baseball, soccer, basketball, like team sports, like you can't win on your own. Maybe Michael Jordan. But outside of that, I mean, he had Scottie Pippen. So, I mean, when you start to think about this, you can't do this on your own. So you have to make sure that you're keeping people in the loop and you're asking their opinion genuinely.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back again to the Era 404 cast, the only error message worth subscribing to. Today, we have guest Jay Piskorik. Is that how I pronounce your last name?
You got it.
Beautiful. We've got Jay here with us today. How are you feeling, Jay? How's it going?
I'm good. Excited to be here. Excited to talk with you.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you on. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jay. Tell me about your background. What brings you into the world of tech?
Sure. Oakdale, born and raised, right outside of Pittsburgh. So I've been here my whole life. Went to Slippery Rock University. Then, jumped into a career in tech, the normal way, QA, customer service, those types of things, kind of learning the ropes. And luckily along the way to have a bunch of good mentors who kind of ushered me along on, how to work in a corporate environment, especially in a tech corporate environment, everything that comes along with that. Worked at a company called giftcards.com. Really good experience. Got to work with the owner there, Jason Wolf. Really good human being. He was another one who ushered me around from being kind of a kid who was rambunctious and didn't really know how to slow myself down to kind of figure out, what was the most important things. Then I transitioned over into Dick's Sporting Goods with a bunch of people who were just, fantastic. I think, when we were doing some of the pre-stuff I was talking about, you don't like to call people family in the corporate world, but just like really good people who I still talk to every day. We were doing a project there called Project Eagle, which was basically all the insourcing of the Dick's Sporting Goods properties websites. So kind of building it from an external SaaS offering into something that we would be owning. And then we transitioned. Once we got that live, we decided that we wanted to rewrite everything over within a few months after being live. So, three years of work straight into like, hey, let's rewrite everything. So really good people there. Got to learn a ton about like how you work with people and about, some of the friction that happens with change. And the biggest change was when our CTO, Paul Gaffney, came in and kind of opened our eyes to the product kind of way of working and how a group called Pivotal worked and really learned empathy and how to work with people and even more and how to bring them along too when things are tough. From there, I transitioned over to Kohl's, which was an interesting experience. A lot of good people there, working as VP of platform there and trying to change how infrastructure worked and how we thought about things from not just being a cost center of, hey, we need this stood up in months to getting things done in minutes and hours. Yeah. So including new technologies and learning along the way. So it's been an interesting career, but, I think the thing that's been the best part about it is the people that I've had the opportunity to work with and work for. So
yeah, sounds like you're a great guy to have on a team, because it's not, it can't just be about one person. And you talked a lot about the people that you met and all of these, people that you technically aren't family, but feel like it a lot of the times. And that's huge when you're working on a team that's trying to produce something and things get hard, like you said, like you're coming up on friction points. And so tell me a little bit about like how was it coming on with different teams or trying to navigate friction points within your teams? Like, what was that like?
Well, I think you get it because I mean you were a D1 athlete. I mean you understand like that kind of there's that team aspect, but there's always that like, hey, I always want to win. I always want to like be pushing
Yeah.
and some people you can come on strong for. I'm nowhere near perfect. Like I'm sometimes an acquired taste with my kind of like push to say like, hey, let's get this done as soon as possible. And people are like, well, why? And I think that's the biggest thing you learn is like the question of why. That's probably the biggest
Mm.
question when you're working through a lot of these things of why are we doing anything. So if you just come in and say like, hey, let's go get this done, everyone kind of like looks around and like, what's he talking about, and
Yeah.
why, and who's asking him, what are we doing this for? Again, another a great person I got to work with in a very short period of time was a guy by the name of Vlad Rack. He's the CTO at Dick's Sporting Goods right now, and he always led with why. And like that was one thing from talking to him. He was always like the first question out of his mouth was always why. So like
Yeah.
you got really kind of figured out like how do you lead that way. But I mean, anytime you're joining a new team, it's tough because I mean, especially if you're coming into a group that's been together for a long time. I mean, at Coles when I started there, that group was well formed and had been working a certain way for a long time, and trying to figure out why we wanted to go from something that they thought worked into new ways of how we broke our work up, how we decided to talk with a bunch of different people, and why it was important to keep teammates who weren't directly involved in the work engaged, because even though you don't see a direct impact to somebody, they can be indirectly affected. And it's one of those things where they're always like, what the hell just happened? Like everything was working and now it's not. And you said it was going to be one way, but it's this other way. So making sure the communication's high. And I think that's probably the biggest thing whenever you're joining a new team is to try to over communicate and again, lead with the why. Like, here's why I'm thinking this. Here's what I'm seeing,
Mm.
where I think we need to go this direction. And obviously, there are always going to be those people who are going to be a little bit nervous or questioning like, does he have any idea what he's talking about, or is this just another kind of fly by night, someone who got a title and they just want to come in and change everything to show an impact. So it's really one of those things you have to step back and listen first before you start to say, okay, we're going to rip everything apart and do it over again. Because imagine the feeling of you're putting a lot of effort into something and somebody comes in and just tells you you're wrong right off the bat. So
Mm.
so the idea of trying to be empathetic and listen to people rather than just say like, no, we have to do this. There's always going to be those times where leadership or the business says it has to be this way. There's nothing you can do about
Yeah.
it, but it's how do you form that communication between the
Yeah.
people?
Also, nobody likes that. Like when management, especially somebody that's never touched what you're working on and has never seen it in action, comes in and is like, actually, you're doing it wrong. Like that is one of the most frustrating things I've ever had to deal with. And even in like in sports and softball, like when somebody tells you like, oh, you're throwing wrong, like your throwing motion is wrong. And it's like, who are you? I don't even know who you are. Like you are coming in out of nowhere. And that was I'm ashamed to say me through a lot of my career and who genuinely was wanting to help me but you work so hard on something and you make it your own and somebody that you barely know comes in and tells you that you did all that work for nothing and that it's wrong. Like that is almost more of an ego hit or like a hit to like all of that stuff that you just did. It's not even attacking, like it's not even meant as an attack first of all, and then it's not even coming at like your talent or your skill or your background. But it feels that way, and it really does. And one thing that I think I've noticed with uh dealing with various coaches and supervisors and it is when they're willing to get in the trenches and do the work with you, like when they're willing to show up and help you work through something and then kind of almost modeling the quote unquote right way to do it, or the way that they've done it they've recognized is better. And it's a lot more personal. It feels that way, and it feels less like an attack and more like guidance or like leadership. So that is one thing that it was like one strategy that I've really picked up on and have really tried to emulate since. Like if I see something that's being done in a different way that I don't necessarily think is the best way, my first thing is like, okay, well, let's figure out why are they doing it that way. And like you just said, like leading with the why. Okay, well, why are they doing it that way? Like what is the reason? And then you almost start with like discovery, and then it makes more sense why they do it that way. And then you have a better idea of, is your solution actually gonna help them? Or are you just, like you just said, you've got this title and you want to come in and you want to make an impact for yourself? Like, is your goal actually to help that other person, or do you just want to look good? Which I've had to check myself on as well. I like, do I just want to like inflate my ego, or do I actually want to help somebody? So I think it's important, especially for anybody that's in a leadership role, to constantly be checking themselves. Like, are you really coming from the right place? And if you are, then are you going about it the right way? And not even to say that my way of doing it is the right way, but it definitely, when I was on the receiving end, it made me feel a lot better to feel like somebody cared
Mhm.
and wasn't just like throwing, like barking orders at me. So, yeah, no, I completely understand. And it's funny that like leading with the why is almost, it feels like that first step, like you just said. And that's great that your supervisor was able to do that just naturally. So
Yeah.
that people like that are very invaluable, truthfully.
A lot of the stuff is checking your ego. I mean, just because at the end of the day, your title only signs you up for the losses, your team has to get the wins. So it's
Mm,
making sure that you are staying in communication. And even though you have an idea, it's not coming across as this is the direction. It's, does this make sense? Um,
yeah.
because the first time you think you're the smartest person in the room is a problem.
Mm,
So, I mean, there's a reason that, you know, when you look at growing up and being in team sports, like especially with softball, baseball, soccer, basketball, like team sports, like you can't win on your own. Maybe Michael
right.
Jordan, but like outside
Yeah.
of outside of that, I mean, he had Scottie Pippen. So, I mean, when you start to think about this, you can't do this on your own. So you have to make sure that you're keeping people in the loop and you're asking their opinion genuinely, not just
Mm.
as you're like, oh, I checked this box that I got to have this conversation with, person X because I know they're going to be the toughest person when we try to move forward with this. So I want to make them feel like they're included in this. It's better to actually get their feedback early on and keep those feedback loops constantly going throughout the whole process.
Yeah. And then it's like you have that open communication and people feel more confident coming to you when they have problems or when they have insight. But I love how you said your title doesn't sign you up for the wins, it only signs you up for the losses. Your team has to get the wins. That is, I have never thought of it that way. And that is so true. And that's such a good way to look at it, because it's absolutely right. Like, if that project hits the fan and falls apart, like, it's the lead whatever, the VP whatever, the CT, CE whatever, C level, that's their loss. But if you win, then it's the team. So investing in your team and investing in their confidence levels, or investing in their mindset is so, so, so important. And that's such a good way of looking at it. And it's such an easy way to make sure that your ego is getting checked. Because like you said, when you think you're the smartest in the person in the room, you got a problem. Like, because everybody that you talk to knows something that you don't know.
Yep.
And that is so, it's so powerful having that mindset, because it's like admitting that you don't know everything is the first step to actually learning more. Because when you think you know everything, then you're closed off, and you're subconsciously, this, like, you have the veil over your head and you can't see the opportunities that are in front of you because you think you already know. And when you peel that back and you're able to see things for what they are, and see opportunities for what they are, you, number one, I feel like you are open to them. So exploring them, recognizing them, that comes so much easier. And then two, you're able to connect with other people who are having these ideas and who maybe have more. or are able to teach you something, and then you're also learning from that. So that's, I mean, and you absolutely put it right. And I also agree when you said checking your ego is the biggest thing. Like, I feel like no matter where you're at, whether it's sports, corporate America, starting a new startup, investing, starting a family, like relationships, there is no room for an ego in any of that. So I completely agree. Like having your ego is probably like holding on to that ego is the source of a lot of these problems that we see. So I know my own personal journey with your ego because it sneaks up on you, doesn't it? Like it creeps on in there and it starts so small because everybody's like, yeah, obviously ego is like not a great quality to have, but it it gets you where you don't even like realize it's there, you know? So
Yeah,
that's like,
it's one of those interesting things. Like, and these are all lessons I had to learn the hard way. I'm by no way perfect, and there's probably people who listen to this and be like, he has a big ego. I mean, he's kind of an asshole. Like, and like I accept that because like I again, like I said, sometimes I'm an acquired taste, and like I tend to believe that as soon as I meet somebody and like we're working together, we're automatically friends. So like I kind of like maybe get a little bit too forward or jokey about things, or try to make jokes to like break up the tension, and people are like, that was inappropriate, not from what I said, because like the timing was off, and they just
yeah.
kind of look at you and you're just like, I did it again. But you have to learn those lessons, and again, a lot of it's like just talking to people and finding people who will give you feedback, that they're not afraid
Mm-hmm.
of title or position, that if you ask like, hey, what wasn't working, what did I
Mm-hmm.
do that like didn't bring the team together or set us back, or again, it's that approach of I'm not going to be the only one who's making a decision. It's usually going to be a team decision of like,
Mm-hmm.
is really the best thing for us and the company, um,
Yeah.
or is this the best thing for the team? So making sure that you have that ability to kind of take a step back and be open to feedback, and be able
Yeah.
open to hear the hard things, that like, yeah, you messed up, like
Yeah.
it's recoverable. Most things are recoverable, but like you can't bull in a china shop this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a, I feel like it's a tough pill to swallow seeing something kind of fall apart and you're like, "Oh, that sucks." And then it's like, "Wait, did I do that?" And then you're having to like self-evaluate and swallow that, like the fact that it might have been your fault. And then you gotta talk to somebody else about it, and then it's like you feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm having to admit to somebody else that that could have been on me,
Yep.
and it sucks. It really, really does. And there's nothing about it that feels good in that moment. Like, but there's so much power in having the ability to do that and own something that you did that I know for me was a huge, huge shifting point in my life was understanding that taking ownership of a mistake is the most powerful thing that you can do. Is the most no, well, number one, because not a lot of people are able to do that. It takes a level of emotional maturity. It takes a level of situational awareness, of self-awareness to be able to openly, candidly, honestly say, like, yeah, that one was on me. And then not only that, but it almost takes the fuel out of other people who want to throw insults and be like, oh my gosh, that was all his fault. That was all his fault. And then as soon as you own it and you say, yeah, I should have done that better.
I think bringing it to the table that every version of product management, project management, waterfall, agile, everything ends with a like a reflection. Like I don't like to
Mhm.
use postmortem because that's a really negative kind of way to think about things, but it's like it's a way of coming together after whatever your period of work is, to say like, what could we have done better? What didn't work? Um, why weren't we as successful as we thought we were going to be at the beginning of whatever we were doing? Everything ends with that. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone understands that there's going to be failure. It's just how do you handle that failure? And how do you
Yeah.
maturely handle the conversation after the
Yeah. Because it is tough. Like you do have to like you can't have any ego because if you have ego going into it, then it's like you don't want it to be your fault, so you're gonna look for all of the ways that it could maybe not be your fault. Like I was playing in a game and we have a really short field and I play outfield. So I did that one game and except there was a runner at first and I wasn't thinking about her. I just kind of went muscle memory,
right to
picked
second?
it up, threw it to second, and that runner scored, which she should not have. But if I would have thrown it in line with where that runner was at, she would have either held up at third or there would have been a good play at the plate. So I come back in the dugout thinking I did exactly what I was supposed to do, third to second base. And my coach was like, dude, when have you ever been told to be a robot and do the same thing over and over again? That is not what anybody has ever taught you to do. And she was like, oh my God, to throw it to second. And she's like, Lindsay, think the game. Like, you need to be thinking the game. And I was like, I didn't want it to be my fault because, then that means I did something wrong. So I'm having to like try to defend myself. But at the end of the day, the runner scored and she
Yeah.
should not have. So it's like, do I want to justify why I'm not good enough to get that runner out? Or do I want to say, you know what? I am good enough. I am good enough to think the game. I'm good enough to get her out. And I'm smart enough to be able to differentiate. I just made a mistake. So when you think about trying to justify or defend yourself, are you defending a negative outcome because that's all you're capable of? Or are you trying to protect your emotions by justifying a negative outcome?
Yeah.
And that changed a lot for me.
And in technology, it was one of the first things that Paul brought into DSGs. Everything breaks. Like, so don't justify the way you got there. Talk about how it's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
Like, what is the change, right? Like in your position that time, like you're probably next time you're out there, you're more aware of where the runners are. And like okay, and going through your head, which you probably hadn't to do this for a long time, was thinking about, okay, a runner on first. If I get the ball, where am I going with this?
Mm-hmm.
Having to think through plays that, muscle memory, like you've played for so long that like normally that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, it happens. Everything breaks. So,
yeah.
I mean, what's the next thing? How do you fix it? And how do you make sure it doesn't happen again? It's lessons that you learn, right? As you go through your whatever career you're in, you figure out like, okay, I didn't like the feeling on that, because that's really what your reaction was. You weren't justifying the mistake. You were justifying that you let your team down. Like that was probably like the real feeling.
It couldn't have been me, because then it's like you have to own that feeling of like, dang, I'm the one that let everybody down. Dang, I gave my pitcher another run that she's got to now try to protect. So, yeah, no, absolutely. And like you said, like everything's gonna break. It's gonna happen. So when you try to say that something's not your fault, or you want, for whatever reason, you want it to not be your fault, because that's uncomfortable. Like that's icky. That's gross when something's your fault and then it's like you have to sit in that. But if you take it up like another level, it's like, yes, it feels gross right now, but now you have the power to fix it. Whereas if it's not your fault, what are you going to do about it? It's just going to happen again and you can't fix it. So you're just at the mercy of whatever it was that went wrong. So if you said everything's going to break, stop justifying how you're going to fix, or how, oh, well, I just got to throw my hands up and say, well, dadgummit, hope it doesn't happen again.
And everybody who you played with on that field has made a mistake.
Exactly.
Right. So, I mean, Jordan's missed free throws. Paul Skeens leaves up home runs. Ariel Amusement stopped on a breakaway. Like, this is going to happen. It is what it is. It's just, how do you come back from that? And that's usually the biggest thing, especially like in your career. It feels even worse because it's like, then you start to think about like, am I going to be undervalued now? Because like, are people not going to want to like include me in something because I just messed this up? And it goes back to sports and teams and everything that you do. A leader needs to pick you up. your teammates need to pick you up all the same.
Yeah. And I feel like when you own something and when you have the nuts to be able to be like, yeah, that was me. Sorry guys. I goofed that one up. You give them the ability to pick you up and say, you're good. We're going to help you. Everything's going to be fine. We're going to damage control. We're going to fix this. We're going to figure out how to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then you're opening yourself up to that support. Whereas if you are pushing blame off and you're saying, well, so and so didn't double check me, or I sent this document to 8 people and nobody caught that mistake, then they get defensive. And now they don't want to talk to you. And then they're pointing the finger at you like, okay, well, you made the document. So if it's got a mistake in it, that's on you.
Yep.
And now it's the finger pointing game, and nobody's happy and nobody's learning anything. We're just gossiping. So it's like, even when I've even had days where it's like, I've looked for ways for things to be my fault because of not wanting people to play the finger pointing game. And I've eaten a lot of stuff that, do I genuinely feel like some stuff was my fault? No. But if I can own something and say, you know what, I should have done this better. I should have double checked you better. I should have packed an extra pair of socks in case somebody forgot some. I own that. That way I'm saving everybody else from joining in on the we hate this girl or we hate this guy parade, because it happens so easily. Win. Nobody wants to play that game. So honestly, like I've done that several times, have just eaten consequences and said, you know what,
Yep.
my fault. Point the finger at me, please, so we can stop pointing it at each other.
It's not easy. I mean, again, like it's all part of growth, and
Yeah.
in everything you learn, and people have self-reflection about like how could this have been better, like you said, like and avoiding conflict and things. Sometimes it's better just to go into your little conversation and say like, okay, what did we do wrong here? Where was the disconnect? Like, should your cutoff person been yelling cut 3 instead of letting you just turn around and fire it into 2? Could we have met more before launch of a big change or a new feature? Where was the disconnect? Usually it comes down to some sort of form of communication where someone was thinking one thing and the other person was thinking something completely different, and just because there was a lack of communication or just not the right communication, people start to struggle with that.
Yeah. Getting communication is really like the key piece there, and how we communicate with people, because what we would find a lot is the over communication would almost tarnish the good communication, because then it's like we're going through things in depth, then people are just like rolling their eyes because they're like, we already know this, like we've already been over this 100 times, like we get it. And then it's like we come across something that's important that maybe people we're finding out that people aren't aligned on, but they're already checked out. And it's a big part of that we were having to figure out was, how are we going to communicate effectively and efficiently? Because when you're just talking just to talk, it just turns into like, after a while, like Charlie Brown's like mom or whatever. Like you don't hear anything that's being said. So
my friend Owen once told me that like people don't yell and scream because they're mad. They do that because they're not being heard. And like I had to stop and think about it. Because when you think about interactions with your parents or anything like that, my mom and my dad, anytime like they would yell, like I could probably think that like I did something and it was stupid, and it was probably because I wasn't listening and just did my own thing. So I mean, it's a very interesting thought process to like people get angry to the point that because they don't feel like they have a voice. And that's with most change. And when you see like employees check out or they just don't want to be, part of the team anymore. They're just like, let me do my own thing, is because they don't feel like they have that voice anymore. So that's something you have to figure out how to correct as soon as possible, so you don't lose good people or, again, hurt the team because, they start to see this negative attitude or, hurt that this person's going through, and they're trying to either like stay away from it or try to over rotate to help that person. And it's like,
Yeah.
we're now losing the plot of the direction that we're going. So how do we bring everyone back
Yeah.
together?
That is such a sensitive balance because you can't like when that happens, you can't just let them suffer, you know? Like you're only as powerful as a team as you can be like united. So if everybody's on a different page, like people aren't even in the same book, then it's like you're even if they've all got, their thing going and they're flowing with themselves. Okay, great, but how are you gonna bring the team with you? How are you gonna bring your how are you gonna get this project to meet the deadline when everybody else is working on different like they can't communicate on the stuff that they're doing because they don't feel like they have a voice. They don't even want to communicate because they don't feel heard. So it's like why even waste your breath? Like that it's pointless. And then they know that and you've got this disjointed group of people who are all working on the same thing. They feel like they have to do it all themselves. And especially as like somebody in a leadership position or like a management like oversight role, like you can't just even when it's just one person, like the rest of your team's communicating and one person feels like their voice isn't heard. So you notice them kind of like drift off from the herd. Like you can't just let that person flounder because then you're losing all of the assets that they bring to the table. Like they're in the room for a reason, they're on the team for a reason. They bring valuable tools to the group, but it's so important to like even when you recognize that happen to one recognize that it's happening and then two be able to reel that person back in and let them know that they do have a voice and show that like not just tell them but like get in it like we talked about earlier like get in there with them like get in their head like show them that you mean it show them that you care and make them really feel like they do have a voice and that is probably one of the toughest things that I've ever tried to do, especially, on a team where you've got 22, 23, 24 very, very different personalities and trying to make everybody feel or try to get everybody to understand how important they are, even if they're not in a role that they want to be in, which is another one. When people are in a role that they don't necessarily want to be in, they almost like it becomes this questioning their self-worth and it's like how do you show somebody that they are still providing impact and that they're still making a difference no matter where they're at and giving them that confidence. That's probably one of the toughest ones that I've encountered. I don't know about you, but
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to lose their role, right? They want to be valued. They want to be, made to feel like they are helping the team and pulling the rope in the right direction. And then, you come in with these major changes, regardless of it's a coach or, technology changes every 2 to 3 years. It just flips. It is what it is. It's for better or worse world that we live in where, this is the way to go. Like starting to adopt the idea of, you know, don't fall in love with any of your ideas because
mm,
in 2 years, 2 weeks, 2 months, you may start thinking a completely different way because the conversation way it goes, or something new gets launched, a new technology, AI comes involved. There's always these changes that come, and it's how do you make people feel like they're not going to be left behind, or you're not putting them at risk for being a team.
yeah, yeah, that security almost and letting them know that they are still valued and that it's not a personal attack when something needs to change or we need to shift or we need to introduce something new that providing that security and I feel like that almost would come like as a preliminary step making like it's almost like ongoing maintenance, like checking in with people, making people like making letting people know how important they are so that when something does need to change or something does need to shift, it doesn't feel as personal because of XYZ reasons or all of these things that we just did that have made them feel very important and have made them feel very good about where they're at. Um, they're not as sensitive to change or as sensitive to like on an emotional level, they're not super emotionally dysregulated by a shift or a change or a rearrangement of, roles or titles or management or
Yeah.
for whatever reason. People being very secure. And I think that's kind of an ongoing kind of it's like it's a habit. It's not just like a one-time thing, you know?
Yeah, it's again, it's those feedback loops and keeping people feeling that their opinion is heard and validated, or heard and appreciated. So
Absolutely.
not just, again, making some going around the room and making everyone talk because like you think that's going to be the win.
Yeah.
Actually having authentic conversations with people, saying like, you're kind of checked out in that meeting, what's going on, like are you not on board with direction, or is it like
Yeah.
what are you feeling about this that's kind of making
Mhm.
you not being as engaged? And some of it could just be,
Yeah.
everyone's dealing with a million things outside of work, family, friends, pets, everything that's going on in the world. And, sometimes they just might have a bad day. And
Yeah.
it's remembering that you have bad days as well. And you can't hold
That.
somebody, like, give them the space to figure it out, and then get them back engaged and say like, okay, now that we're back, how are you feeling about this?
Mhm.
Where did we go wrong here, or where do you feel like you could provide more value than what we're giving you the opportunity to?
And a big part of that too is like having somebody say, "What did I do wrong? Is
Mm-hmm.
there anything I could have done better to help you, to better support you, to help take care of you?" And then it's like, if it is a situation where it's like, sorry, they've got having a rough time at home, or the family, or an external situation that's going on, it's the power of saying, is there anything I can do to help you? I want to help you. Let me help you. And actually showing up for people when you're not getting anything out of it, it speaks volumes. It really does. And helping people feel like they matter outside of whatever targets they're hitting, or if they're hitting their numbers, or if like they're not just an ROI, you know? So that, I feel like, really does speak volumes. I know it did when people treated me that way. So
Yeah, and another friend of mine would always say, "People, not resources." So,
mm,
like, how many resources do we need on this? He would just Dave would just stop the conversation, saying, "People, not resources." And it's what again, like, you get so kind of like sterilized to the conversation because your head down into like, how are we solving this, or how are we going to get to the end goal of that, you really forget the humanity part of it. And it's good to have people, and it's good to have emotional safety where people can say like, hold on, we're not talking about this the right way, like, we're all people here, like, let's take a breath and remember that. So again, it's making sure that you depend on your team, and you don't get so in love with your own ideas that
mm,
you hear other people.
you don't want to fall so in love with your own ideas that you're sacrificing the rest of the team. It's so true. And we do that all the time, truthfully, like as people, as leaders, as people who are so focused on accomplishing a goal or a task or a deadline, that fall in love with the person in the mirror and forget about all of the people that are holding you up and all of the people's shoulders that you're standing on. And that is such a powerful thing. And I really do hope that this is so much wisdom that you're giving us, Jay. And I appreciate you, taking the time out of your day to show up for us and do this, and selflessly, for no benefit to you, just come out here and share some of that gold with us. So I appreciate you doing
No,
this for us.
no, thanks for having me. And like, it's not even my wisdom. It's just I was lucky enough to have a lot of good people around me coming up through my career, and like my parents, and just listening to them and knowing that, like, I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room, so I'm never going to try to be that person. So I was lucky that there were a lot of people who invested in me, and anything that I can give back, I got to make sure that I do that.
What an awesome outlook to have. That's, uh, well, I'm so glad that we were able to chat today. I think this is really going to be something that people are going to resonate with a lot and be able to take a lot from. So, again, I am so grateful that you decided to do this with me today. And for anybody listening, I'd love to hear it. If anything really stuck out to you, let me know in the comments, please. I'd love to hear what you guys are resonating with. In the meantime, check out a few of our other episodes. We'll be out with another one soon, but until that happens, try not to get lost. But if you do, you know where to find us on the Error 404 cast.